Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February 2023 General Meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Alan Bowser. I'm currently the president of Civic Fed. I want to welcome you all to this exciting program we have this evening with our guest, Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich. Before we proceed, we're going to take care of some Federation business that we do at the beginning of our general meetings. And the first thing is to move the adoption of the agenda for the February meeting. So the agenda is on page 2 of our newsletter. Does somebody want to make a motion to accept?
I make a motion to accept.
Is there a second? It's been first and seconded. Peggy Dennis seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 That's enough.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The second order of business is to approve the minutes from the from the January 9th meeting. It's on page 20 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the January meeting? Motion to adopt. Approve. Liz Joyce, second.
Yeah.
Karen Cordry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes from the January 9th meeting have been adopted. Next order of business is a treasurer report. Our treasurer is Jerry Garson. Jerry, will you make a treasurer's report, please?
We operate on a fiscal year from July 1 through June 30th. So far, we've received $977 worth of dues, and we've had expenses of $1,227, giving us a net deficit of $249. Our current bank balance is $8,454, and we've had no activity within the last 30 days. We had a quantity of activity in the beginning of January, but we've had no income or expenses in the last 30 days. If there are any questions, either contact me or raise a question now.
Thank you for the treasurer's report, Jerry. We would remind all of our participants this evening that they can join as individuals. You can join the Civic Federation by going to the website, which is montgomerycivic.org. You can join as an individual. And of course, we would like to get the participation of all Montgomery County homeowners associations and civic associations. You can also join at montgomerycivic.org. At this point in our program, we ask people to make announcements that the general audience would find interesting. Does anybody have announcements for the good of the order? Not seeing any. We'll move on to our program. Later, when we entertain questions from the audience for the county executive, you can wave your hand wildly and maybe we'll see you. A much better way is to click on the reaction button on the bottom of your screen. And at the bottom of the reaction button, you will see a raise hand icon. And we can acknowledge you that way. So please ask any questions you want of our county executive. He's been very good in the past in answering any and all questions. So without further ado, Mark Elrich, the Montgomery County executive, is a good friend of the Civic Federation and communities across the county. He was sworn into his second term as county executive in December of last year. We posted in our February newsletter his remarks from the inauguration, as well as the capital budget for this year. He's open to any questions. And so without further ado, let me welcome Montgomery County Mark Elrich, executive, to talk to the Civic Fed. Mark, thank you for being here. You are muted. There you go.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. So look, I want to thank everybody for inviting me. And I kind of wish we were doing some of these things in person again, because it's nice to be, I've been to a couple of meetings with a reasonable number of people. I got to say, it's nice to be able to do that, and hybrid works as well. But it's just good to be out here. And I went through the pictures of everybody in the gallery, and I know an awful lot of you. So thank you all for persisting at this through many, many years. I think it's really important the work that you do. So I'm trying to think about, where the best place to start is for tonight. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit about where we stand with some of the things we're doing. My first term obviously was not exactly what I anticipated as a first term as county executive. I did not anticipate COVID. I don't know what I didn't see it coming, but I didn't. And that, certainly threw a wrench into a lot of the work we did, but I'm actually proud of the work we did. I think, the county made some very difficult decisions that wound up keeping a lot of people safe. And, we remind people that, our death rate was 2/3 of the rate of the rest of the country, which means a whole hell of a lot of people would have been alive if they had done the things that we did in Montgomery County. And we're at a point now where so many people are vaccinated and the remainder have probably already had COVID once at least, that we're able to withstand this, latest variant without a lot of deep issues in the community. People are still dying, and just in case anybody's confused, they're dying a lot more frequently from COVID than they would die from the flu. So if anybody tries to tell you it's just like the flu, I may feel just like the flu, but when it comes to dying, it's not anything like the flu. So we continue to, maintain our awareness of where it is. We're in like low transmission now, which is good news. And hopefully we'll stay here at least for, the foreseeable future. And, the county, certainly benefited from federal funds in order to get through this. It was that miracle election that made it possible for the federal government to provide the kind of funding the county would need to deal with some of the issues. But we were able in last year's budget to not use any of the federal money to balance our budget. So we've been able to use the federal money for really COVID-related issues, things above and beyond day-to-day business. And our budget's been pretty solid. My first budget was the last budget under Ike Leggett and last budget under the council I was on. By December of that year, we had almost a $50 million shortfall. By March, we were at a $95 million shortfall. We had to make major cuts in our current budget at the time, and then we had to make cuts in our projections for the budget that we were developing, because these were losses, a lot of them in property tax revenues, and because of the stupid cap we had on property tax revenues, it really impacted our ability to recover. It was almost like if you had a bad year, that became the cap for the next year. And so that really hindered that first year. But since then, we've done 3 budgets. Those budgets haven't resulted in doing mid-year savings like we had done in the past when I was on the council. Mid-year savings plans, sometimes multiple plans, were the norm, and we've managed to get through this without having to do that. We've made major increases in funding. The first couple of years, we were level funding for the pandemic, but this last budget put a lot of money, record amounts of money, in fact, into housing, record amounts of money into climate change, record amounts of money into early childhood education. Those are all things that I thought were, really important to be able to take action on. I'm glad we were able to do that. The county also started dealing with racial equity issues. When I was on the council, one of the last pieces of legislation we passed was something that would require the next council and executive, which was me and the new council, to address racial equity and create a racial equity office. And we did that. And we've begun building out that office. And their work plays a role in how we look at things like the county budget. And they look at both operations, they look at capital spending. They bring awareness to people. They're also training people. It's very difficult to run this department first with one person, now with three people, so they're doing trainings, and then the trainers train the next group of people. But it's a long way to work your way through county governments. They've done a lot of broad work talking about how you look at a capital budget and what things you need to do to analyze whether the money's being spent equitably across the county. I felt it was important to do that when I was on the council, and so I was glad that I got to implement it as county executive. One of the big things we tackled has been changes in the police department, and we are, still going through this process. I tried the first couple of years to raise police pay because we saw that our numbers were going down, and we were told that, we were low in the pay scale relative to other jurisdictions, and that we weren't competitive. We put in a bill that would have made us competitive, and it didn't get through the council. And so by the time this last round of negotiations came up, we had managed to achieve probably the lowest paid in the region in terms of police, which really impaired our ability to recruit. The council did pass agreements last year that raised starting pay and police pay in general and improved some of the benefits. So I was really happy to see that, and it's bumped our recruiting numbers up, but our recruiting numbers still are below the projected retirements for the next 2 or 3 years. So we're continue to work to see what we can do to bring those numbers up a little bit more so that we're actually competitive. I don't think anybody would argue that in this day and age, in this time, we should reduce the police force. And so the other part of the racial justice work was to basically change the police force, to retrain people, deal with areas of over policing, deal with how we keep track of our records. Do we know who has had a problematic encounter with a civilian? A lot of things that the county wasn't doing when I got elected. And so that became one of the priorities. And we've spent a couple of years and with a consulting firm that whose job it was to look at body-worn cameras to see what happens with somebody when they encounter a police officer. Did the body-worn cameras, the footage reveal that people were following what we expected, or were they not following what we expected? And we've made changes in use of force. We've made changes in duty to intervene. The state passed legislation, which we supported, which is going to bring about more changes over the next year or two. And the departments worked with us and the unions worked with us. So by and large, we've had a pretty good response as we try to move things forward in the county. And that was one of the major priorities. And I will note that we started our work before George Floyd. We are not a reaction to George Floyd. We are a reaction to the reality that we saw in Montgomery County coming into office. And I was glad that the council was supportive and we were able to move forward on the kind of work we're trying to do. We continue to, struggle in a number of different places. I mean, a lot of people talk about housing. The county, right now, the county has almost 40,000 units approved that a developer could just go out, pull the permits and build the housing. There's no regulatory process between them building and their current permit status. There's no more regulations to go through or anything. And yet we're not seeing the construction. And over the past 4 years, we are getting construction, but almost all of it is in the market rate sector. It would meet the projections for market rate housing over the 10 years, but almost nothing is being built in the non-market rate sector. And there are a lot of reasons for it, and we can talk about it later, but I mean, to me, the big things are that Montgomery County's signature program, the moderately priced dwelling unit program, was designed in the mid-70s when the county was 95% white and when a low-paying job was a teacher and, firefighter and policeman, and it was meant to house those people. And most people in the county were working class and middle class, but a lot of the working class people were tradespeople. So they had decent enough money that they could buy the homes that were being built. and very different county. And here we are, 50 years later, and our demographic is very different. We're a majority minority county. The income levels in the county are a lot lower. And so the people who are served by our housing programs are different than the people who need housing the most. And so none of our programs really touch people down to 30 to 50% of area median income, and they don't serve people, particularly in high market places like Bethesda. Nobody builds market units that would serve people making $85,000 or $90,000 a year. Almost everything is built above that price point. So that's a lingering problem. And despite, putting record money into this, it's going to be really challenging to figure out how do you deal with who's projected to be coming to the county by 2030. I think some of the number was projected at like 40,000 households. 10,000 of them would be market rate households. So we're building the housing that'll accommodate that. The other 3/4 were people making below $75,000 a year, and 2/3 of them were making less than $50,000 a year. So you can kind of see just from that our programs don't match what the housing need is. And none of this counts the over 50,000 households who are here today making less than $50,000. So we've got a long way to climb in this, and we're not going to get out of it doing our existing programs. And we're not going to get out of it if all we require from development is that they give us 15% of their buildings as affordable. And then everything else is high market, wherever they feel the right price point is for them. So that's some of the ongoing work that we're going to be doing, is making more investments in housing. We've got 18 lots up for purchase now. We're focusing on nonprofits, but it can be a nonprofit or a for-profit that comes in and buys or gets access to those properties. And we're requiring that they provide high percentages of affordable housing. We're working with a lot of churches now. We have been approached by probably 10, 12 churches who want us to help them figure out how to locate housing on their sites. And it's really nice because they're working on the same principle we are, which is that they own the land. They don't need money from the land, but they want to help provide housing in their communities. So that's another avenue that's opened up, and I think we're taking advantage of now. There's some other probably hot issues we're dealing with. I will put in the position for an ombudsperson. That was a big position that the county had before, and it got evaporated during the Great Recession. It should have come back a long time ago. I know why the developers don't like it, but I also know why civics like it. And it's important, that citizens get support from the government and not be left on their own when they're dealing with people who have millions of dollars to spend. So a little balance is a good thing. I wish we could totally balance things, but at least we're going to try to put the office of the People's Council back into this. I have two pieces of legislation that we're supporting. One actually got changed. One of Ben Kramer's bills is going to deal with transparency. And most of the transparency legislation has made it through the county legislative committee. So it'll go on to the full House and Senate delegations. And we're optimistic that a lot of the transparency stuff can be done. They did strip out something to give the county executive the power to appoint one person at the request of the council. And so the council continues to provide 5 people. And I was amused that people thought that the suggestion I should appoint 1 out of 5, so somehow a power grab, since I'm pretty sure that 1 out of 5 is like 20% and nowhere near enough to be considered a power grab. The second piece of it that was a legislation to reform the planning process, has been changed into a letter. And the letter was signed by myself and Jeff Science to start looking at the processes in parking planning. And I will tell you, we have, and this is nothing to say about the board or the staff. The staff does their job and the board did not create this mess. So I don't want anybody to think this is a slam on them. But the process that's been allowed to evolve is pretty much a disaster. And it doesn't work. It is very, very costly to developers, and it's very time consuming, and time is money. And you've got to consider inflation impacts on your project and the carrying cost of land that you're not able to develop. And it's sad that, given my reputation, that I'm getting opposed for trying to fix a problem which is impeding the county from being able to match development in other jurisdictions. And it's being impeded by people who claim to be the biggest proponents of developers on the council. It is ironic, but it's also sad because there's no reason for us to be stuck with a system that doesn't serve Montgomery County. If we were getting more quality, if we were getting different decisions or better decisions, if the process made for better planning, then it would be worth it. But it doesn't get you anything any better than you would have gotten otherwise. Montgomery County has this very unique system where the planning board has planning staff that have, I would say, share responsibility for approving developments before they go forward. And the planning staff has no responsibility for implementation. So people can say anything they want, put down anything they think they like, and it goes over to the staff on the executive side. And that staff has to implement a plan, whether it's a road or stormwater or sewers or anything in a plan is subject to review. And so it gets reviewed once by park and planning staff, once by county people. Then you go through a process of trying to get everybody to agree. And this can easily add a year or more to a project. It is a waste of time and it's a waste of money. And nobody else does this. Not a single county in Maryland has this stupid system. If you go to Virginia, they're like everybody in Maryland. You have a planning board. The staff of the county provides support to the planning board. Planning board makes decisions. The staff implements the decisions. That's what I'm trying to get in Montgomery County, and to take out this middle step, which has really, really become problematic for people. And hopefully, calmer reviews will eventually prevail, and they'll hear enough from the developers to realize this is actually a good idea, and we'll make some progress on it. But I'm optimistic we can fix this, and it would be a mistake, and it would be a bad on us if we're not willing to take the time to fix it, because it really, really hurts us. When I talk to Jeff McKay over in Fairfax County, we talk about their advantage in development. It's not price, because our Montgomery County taxes are lower than everybody else's taxes in the region. Our commercial taxes are way lower than Virginia's commercial taxes. And our property taxes are lower than everybody's property taxes except the District of Columbia. So you're in the lowest tax district in the region. You wouldn't know it from the rhetoric. And so it's not the cost that keeps people out of here. It's this process, and it's one tax we have, which I'll talk about in a second. But the process means we can't deliver a project in any known time. When we talk to one of our consultants, JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, which does a lot of work in the world of land use, they will tell you that if Montgomery County is doing a project, or if a developer came and said, could Montgomery County finish this project in 2 years and let us get in the ground? They would answer that Virginia could do it. I have no idea when Montgomery County would get it done. And that is a killer, because people want certainty. They want to know that if they bring a project in and they get an approval, they know how long the approval takes and how long before they get it in the ground. And we don't gain anything by not being able to answer that question. And so that's my goal in changing that. The other thing is a small tax adjustment I want to do. The county uses impact taxes. Many people like myself, long supported impact taxes. They're a source of revenue, but there's not as good as the source of revenue that Northern Virginia uses. The impact taxes come lumpy. They come with each new project. And so nobody gets taxed until they put in the project. So picture Bethesda or Silver Spring, you only get a tax from the project that's being done. The tax is never enough to build the infrastructure you want to build, not on the one building that steps forward. And so that money goes into a fund. And then when any other project anywhere in the county is ready to go, we tap out that fund, we build that project, and you may never see the money you contributed from Bethesda or Silver Spring back in Bethesda or Silver Spring. So I get why the developers are irritated about the tax. Not only do they pay it, they don't get anything for it. And from the government's point of view, I don't get anything for it, and I can't bond off it, which means I can't do long-term projects. Virginia has a different system. They create a series of special taxing districts. The taxing districts are mostly on commercial property. When they set up a taxing district, they go to the developers and they say, these are the projects we're going to build. We're going to float these bonds. This is going to be the tax. The tax will be paid over the next 20 or 30 years, depending on the length of the bond. And oh, by the way, it's paid by the commercial tenants. It's not paid by the developer, which is why they like the tax. I personally don't care who pays the tax, as long as we get the tax, but the ability to put a tax like that into a development district is meant in Virginia. They have a stream of revenues that they can float bonds against and they can build against. And Montgomery County doesn't have that. And so we're stuck not being able to do anything. And so I would love to get unstuck. I'd love to be able to tell people that that BRT line in your master plan is actually going to be built, or that park or school, or name it whatever it is that we say you need to have in order to have additional development. There's actually a way for us to provide it and guaranteeing you're going to get it. So those are, two of the big things I'm working on in the world of development, along with trying to get the ombudsman person. We're making progress. I'd just be blunt about it. The developers are the ones who benefit, and none of us loses in this exchange. So what we really need is for the developers to step up and just make it clear what they want. And hopefully that will occur in the near future, because we really need to be able to compete with Northern Virginia. People, don't want to be a bedroom community. And the problem with the bedroom community is all the taxes are then paid by residential customers, and somebody else gets the commercial tax base. And the best example of that is our neighbor in Washington, D.C. I said Montgomery County was the second lowest on residential. The first lowest on residential is the District of Columbia. So why is DC lower than us? Because DC's residential property tax is 85 cents. We're 99 cents. DC's commercial property tax is $1.85. Our commercial is 99 cents. So DC raises a ton of money on all those commercial buildings in DC that then goes to support DC's budget. And that's money that the county has no way of being able to raise. So that simple change, shifting a large portion of the tax burden from residential to commercial, enables DC to do a lot more things than Montgomery County is able to do. And Virginia's taxing districts, in Tyson's Corner, their tax is $1.65 on all commercial property. If you added up their base property tax, $1.15. All commercial property pays 12.5 cents for a commercial property tax for transportation. The state gives the county 0.6 cents of every penny on the sales tax for transportation. And then they have special taxing districts in the major development areas in Fairfax County that range from about 25 cents to 45 cents. So Tyson's is at $1.65. So when you look at the stuff they're doing over in Virginia and you wonder, how do they do it? It's pretty simple. They tax people. The people they tax are developers. The money goes to build projects that help the developers and increases the value of the property. The developers will pay taxes if the system provides them with things they need, and they'll rebel against taxes in a system that doesn't give them what they need. It's totally logical. And we're trying to convince the council here that we ought to follow the same logic. There's more money for us to be had. We can build more things that our residents want us to build, and nobody winds up any worse for the wear. So that's my pitch to you on some of the stuff we're trying to do in the world, in that world of taxes anyway. So those are the major things other than the White Flint project. I think probably some of you heard a little bit about what we're doing in White Flint, North Bethesda. This has been my 3-year project since I came into office. One of the first things I started asking was, why did Amazon choose Virginia? And the answer was really interesting. People think we got outbid. We did not get outbid. We bid more than Virginia did. But the governor here didn't notice or realize what they were asking for. And the governor of Virginia did. They wanted tech talent. They wanted tech talent next to their campus. And so UVA and George Mason have been used as a lure to assure Amazon they would provide the talent Amazon wants. UVA is building right next to the Amazon campus, and we missed that one. So my lesson was that this isn't all about money. This is about what does it take to bring development to a place. And I thought about Montgomery County. Our major industry is life sciences. It's our one true industry. And it grew a lot, and then it's kind of stagnated, and we were trying to figure out what it needed to grow. So one of the things that distinguishes us, we are the 4th largest tech grouping in the country. We are the 2nd largest talent group in the country. We do not have graduate level research in Montgomery County, particularly related to life sciences. So we don't have what other people have in terms of being able to provide a talent pool. And our stuff is scattered in office parks, and increasingly people don't want to be in office parks. Talking to WMATA about would they be willing to do a joint solicitation for master developer from the North Bethesda site to focus development there around life sciences and build really a life sciences center. And at the same time I was doing that, I was going around to all the universities in the state and asking them if they would invest in bringing a life sciences graduate level program to the same North Bethesda area, where we could put together a new growth of life science companies anchored by an educational institution. And I think COVID made time go slower, and it was slow, and getting people to do things is slow enough as it is. But if you've seen the announcement, the university's announced they're building a center for health in North Bethesda. They are now looking at 40 to 50,000 square feet as an interim facility. 6 months ago, it was 20,000 square feet. And now they're talking about a building that they want to build on the metro station at North Bethesda. And in the meantime, WMATA has agreed to go forward with a solicitation for a master developer to focus on bringing life science companies and other academic institutions and such in and around the North Bethesda metro, so that we can build the true hub in Montgomery County that would put us on the map. The University of Maryland project, Dr. Gladwin from the University of Maryland Medical System says it'll make us the Silicon Valley of health computing. And it's a big deal for people. And we have the University of Maryland Medical System is now partnering in this project, and they're really excited about it. So I've gotten a glimpse of some of the people who are going to be coming here. These are not University of Maryland professors who are going to drive across county. These are industry leaders, scientists, doctors in major industry positions who do both research and bring with them research grants. They've already attracted corporate interests. So they've got companies that have approached Maryland about locating near where they're going to be. So that's where we're going with that. And I'm really excited about it. Wes Moore is coming down this Friday, and we're going to do a tour with him of the area so he can see what we're planning out. And that'll, of course, lead me to explain to him how important it is to give us funding for bus rapid transit, because you can't put 11 million square feet of development there without real transit being added to the mix. Much as Hogan understood and O'Malley understood that you cannot bring Amazon here without making a major investment in transit. And they had 3 BRT lines going into 355 to provide connections to bring people into that corridor. So I'll stop there. You guys can ask me whatever questions you want to ask.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. County Executive. It's good to have you here. We're pleased to hear that you will continue to support the Office of the People's Council. That is our #1 legislative priority at the county level. So thank you so much. And it's good to hear about the project at White Flint moving forward. Everybody can ask a question. Please raise your hand, put some questions in the chat. I'm going to start off with this question. It's relating to the housing issue. And that's about the co-locating affordable housing at the county projects. I saw that in a recent article that you were supportive of that, and it said that you would either sign it or let it become law without signing it. I was wondering what's your current thinking about co-locating affordable housing projects on public properties?
So the law was actually meaningless, which is why I can sign it, not sign it, I don't really care. We do this anyway. We do an evaluation of, any of these public buildings, and there's been evaluations done to determine whether or not housing can be done with this. This isn't new. It's a normal thing for the county to do. What they wanted was to move up the date of the report, which they could have gotten if somebody had sent a letter across the street and said, hey, do you mind giving us this? Would you mind giving us this report a little bit earlier? We would have said that'd be perfectly fine with us. We could have spared them the legislative route, but they legislated it, so they'll get the same thing. But in general, I mean, we've got, I guess it's 18 or 19 places, mostly parking lots, but not exclusively, 4 or 5 in Bethesda, equal number around Silver Spring and Wheaton. There are a couple of green spaces we identified that we can redevelop in the county that the county actually owns, and they have access to nearby roads. So we are soliciting development proposals. I've green lighted a few of them so far. I get a few every couple of weeks to look at, and we're going to continue to go through that list. Next thing we're going to be looking at is garages, because a number of our garages can actually be built on top of. And, I was actually, talk about weird, there was a time when I was meeting with Rollins Stanley and a group of developers and Steve Robbins and people from Mike's staff about what it would take to build on top of some of the county's garages, because you could add 4 or 5 stories to some of these garages. Nobody would care. And we were very interested in doing that. And there's some garages that can take the weight, and some garages would probably have to be rebuilt. But I want to go back to that because we had met with some developers who had some interesting ideas for how to do it. Some people were doing, what do you call it? Not palletized, but they brought in sections of the building at a time. And the buildings went up really quickly. We think it's feasible to replicate this stuff again. And so we're going to take a shot at expanding it there. And we're looking at, some property that we can buy and develop ourselves. And, we're looking in terms of doing a solicitation for a developer to do a design build project. And we would specify what we wanted in terms of numbers of units and what we wanted in terms of a unit mix in terms of bedrooms, and then solicit bids for that. I like design build because that way the builder owns all the design flaws. So if somebody has 2 pipes that don't connect, I don't get a change order. They go to their designer and they say, hey, you screwed up here, you got to fix this. So, we're looking at different ways so we can act more aggressively in the stage. The advantages, we can do projects that are pretty widely affordable. I don't have to worry about building market rate housing for, so I can produce a $7,000 apartment in Bethesda. I don't have anybody who's going to be asking me to provide that kind of return. So we can focus on housing the people who need it most. And I should say, we're looking at changing the MPDU law in conjunction with that. I should have said that earlier. The MPDU law was created in the mid-70s. It primarily serves people who earn between $60,000 and $75,000. So if you're under 60, you're pretty much out of luck. I've seen some stuff, the price is down for people between 50 and 55, but that's about as low as it ever gets. And if you make more than, say, $85,000, you wouldn't qualify if you're a single person, you never qualify for an MPDU in Bethesda. And if you look in Bethesda, the gap between an MPDU 1-bedroom and a market rate 1-bedroom is $1,000 to $1,500, $2,000. So people who are caught in between can't find housing either. So we're going to try to fill the gaps, keep doing what we do in the MPDU scheme, but add units below that level and add units above that level. And when we do it on property we own or control, we have a lot more control. And so you'll see us doing diverse housing. So you'll see people making 100% of AMI in some of our deals, along with people making 30% of AMI. And we're going to call the revisions the Complete Communities Housing Act, because that's what it really is. If you think about what the planning board's done, and I will digress about the planning board, but it's worth it. They're supposed to be planning communities. And if you look what they did in Bethesda and other places, all they've done is plan for 1 and some 2-bedroom apartments at the very, very high end in high-rise buildings that cost $500, $600, $700 a square foot to build. They give you the obligatory MPDUs, unless they're condos, and then they try to buy out of the condos. And there's nothing for anybody in between. And if you were the planning board and you were charged with planning, I don't know, Bethesda, I might think that you'd consider planning a complete community where everybody could live, as opposed to a community where a whole bunch of rich people can live, and then not so much anybody else. So we're going to the extent we have the power to do that, we're going to change it. We're going to hope the council adopts our change policy to get rid of the MPDU log and move to a stronger policy that serves this county more broadly.
Thank you so much, County Executive. Jackie Bocco of our Executive Committee is going to call on people. Jackie?
Okay, let's take some questions. Joel Titlebaum, you are up first. Please unmute and ask your question.
Good evening, Mr. Elrich. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, I'm in bed, but that's okay. I just want to ask you directly, sir, what can you as our county executive and your administration do to spark, I use the word advisedly, spark, I would tend to use the word spank, but I'm not in that business, the Purple Line project, which is a state project with a new governor, new Department of Transportation head, to actually get its job done and build the Purple Line as well as the streets, bridges, sidewalks, and access for our communities and businesses, which are hurting our revenues and hurting our quality of life and economic development.
I can't do any more than the previous executive could do. We're powerless in dealing with the state, and this is a contract between the state. Purple Line partners, it was a mistake. It's an example of why you should not get into a P3. And we got played. And there's no, I mean, the damage is enormous. The cost of this project is going to way exceed any standard for affordability. If this project were going in tomorrow with the costs that it have, it would never meet the affordability test that the federal government has. The state should never have entered into a contract where you didn't have binding arbitration, where one party could get angry and just say, I'm out of here, I'm walking away. That never should have happened, but they did it. So I can't change history, but it leaves the county. We have no leverage points. We don't control any of the funding. We don't control any of the approvals. They pretty much snatch all that stuff from us. So we're left here to basically try to avoid them passing on more costs to us, which of course they've done, because everything that got screwed up that costs more, if it's in the county bucket, then the county winds up having to pay more. So I don't have a good answer for you, but I can tell you honestly, that's where we sit.
Are you, Governor Moore is coming here. Can't you at least talk to him about it?
He doesn't control anything. He has a contract. I can talk to him about it. We talked to their transportation people about it. And everybody, it's like all down to, this is the contract. This is when they have to do things. This is the schedule. This is why it costs so much. I wish I could.
They're not meeting their milestones on their own schedule.
Yep.
What can be done about that?
Well, I don't know. You could kick them out and start over again and get yet another partner.
No, I'm talking about spanking them.
I will look to see if there's any way to spank them, but I don't believe there's any way to spank them.
No spark, no spank. There's not
No
much of,
spark, no spank. They got a sweetheart deal. They know they've got the state under control, to use a plate term. And so the state has no leverage in this at this point.
Thank you, Joe.
thank you.
Carol Barth, please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Mark. A couple years ago, we talked about having distributed air quality monitors. Since the state network is so lacking. And right now there's House Bill 473 that would require particulate monitoring and overburden and underserved census tracts. Given that these particulates can be like 10 times higher in one city block versus another, because particularly in that first 500 to 600 feet next to the busy roadway,
Right.
depending on the building morphology, depending on how much tree canopy you have to suck it up or not, and the fact that you have interactions between the urban heat island and the urban pollution island. So if we're going to be at least getting more census tracts monitored, can the county see its way clear? And it doesn't hurt to suggest also an amendment to this to provide some support for localities to do more monitoring. But can we invest in enough monitors to do the kind of high resolution mapping that's needed? Not just for environmental justice, but really this is all key with climate as well. You know, we have to have both the temperature and the particulate.
Once the state puts this into play, I'd be interested in looking at how could the county piggyback and add monitors to it. I've also asked some people who I know who are better with computers than I am, but I know that Raspberry Pi, which as any of you know is this tiny little computer, can actually be hooked up to sensors, and they make sensors. And I'm trying to find somebody in that space who'd be willing to look into putting together a sensor and tell me what it costs to put that sensor together. Because there's no reason why, if they're as cheap as it looks, and Raspberry Pis are not expensive.
There's
you should be able to put a decent number of sensors out there.
Yeah, there's actually some good off-the-shelf equipment now as well. That Purple Air is one. There's also moving, and I actually am basing this. I have a neighbor who works for NASA in air quality sensing. And so this is an area that I think is really doable now.
So send me the links if you've got them.
Sure, will do.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay, Carrie Lamare, please unmute and ask your question.
Hey, Mark, how you doing, my friend? Two things. First, housing. There's just, the reality is that the market forces will decide what's affordable and what's not affordable. It's always been the case. It will always be the case. The reality also is naturally occurring affordable housing is the predominant way we house people on the lower economic rung of the ladder. And these new proposals that keep coming down are self-defeating. I mean, there's just no way we're gonna be digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's bottom line. Now we could
Carrie, do you
we
have a
could create
question?
affordable housing through community land trusts. Well, that's my opinion. I'd love to have a conversation with you
Yeah.
on that. And secondly, public safety. The council's known for several years now that, we were having an attrition rate, that was crime was starting to go up a little bit, and we were losing police and we weren't paying them appropriately. Now, when are they going to start listening to the public, Mark? When
Well,
is the public going to have that
Gary,
opportunity to
let me-
participate?
Let me answer the questions, Carrie.
Okay, those are the
So
two
they
questions.
they didn't listen to me 3 years ago. They listened to me last year. And they raised the pay. And we're gonna, we recognize we've got a little way to go, but we're actually in pretty good competitive shape this year compared to last year. And hopefully the council will not, we'll just focus on why we're doing it. I mean, as opposed to this is a union and it's a giveaway to a union. I don't know, these are union people who protect your life every day. You ought to be worth paying halfway decently, but that's a different issue.
Competitive at least.
So, but they'll pay attention to what happens over the next month or so. When you see bills come up in front of the council for approval, like police pay and teacher pay and things like that, be there for the people who need to get paid. It's just a fact of life. As far as the housing goes, there are a number of questions people have asked about it, but they've got a really difficult problem. I just said, well, at some point, magical solutions are going to run out because they don't actually solve anything. So the market dictates. I talked to real estate agents.
Absolutely.
So if you could put a triplex, if you go into a Bethesda neighborhood and somebody lets you put a triplex in there with, $1 million homes, $1.2 million homes, are you going to build affordable housing? They said nobody in their right mind is going to build affordable housing. They're building a triplex townhouse where each of the townhouses goes for $1 million or $1.2 million. It's what you said. It's the market. If the market in that neighborhood is $900,000, that's what the townhouses are going to be. If the market in the neighborhood is $1.2 million, then that's what the townhouses are going to be. And so there's not going to be any affordable housing. And if you really dig deeper and you want to test people's sincerity about what they claimed they were going to do. So I looked at what was supposed to be the accompanying legislation for the housing piece of this that they buried at the last spring when they understood how much trouble it was going to cause them. So they were going to allow by right small 15-unit apartment buildings. And a lot of our neighborhoods have small 15-unit apartment buildings. But the thing that caught my idea was number 15. And I wonder how many people on this call know why 15 is a magic number in housing. And I'll tell you why it's a magic number in housing, because you only have to produce MPDUs if you're more than 19 units.
Right.
So there would be no affordable units built in this neighborhood where they were telling you they were going to put affordable housing. It is, in my mind, it's just like it was a bait and switch and a scam. I don't know if they ever believed what they said, because they originally called it affordable housing, and then when their own study said it wouldn't be affordable, they turned it into attainable, which is a totally meaningless phrase. What's attainable to Jeff Bezos is not attainable to a clerk, in Safeway. But that's what they did. So I don't anticipate a whole lot of change. I don't picture all the neighbors getting up and selling their houses. That's just not going to happen. And the one thing the planning board does no power to do, which is change lot lines. So they could say that you could do 3 units on an R60 lot, but the lot lines still have to be drawn. You have to subdivide the property. There's a whole lot of things that go into making it, and then you got to build the projects. And so I don't know if this is going to be a few units, but it's certainly no solution to either the lack of housing construction or the lack of affordable housing. It's not going to produce many units. And it sure as hell not going to produce anything affordable.
Mark, still, the naturally occurring affordable housing in our existing communities, we can, through
Yes.
using community land trust, take advantage of that. If we use, like Alyssa Pierre said, use upzoning as a tool. But if we're going to throw it out there and just carte blanche, make it,
Right.
by right, you're giving Montgomery, well, you aren't.
But
The
I'm not.
council is giving away Montgomery County.
So look,
Thank you,
I'll give you an
Karen.
example
all
of
I've
what
got.
I think you're talking about that makes sense. We signed on to an agreement with the developers over at Alpine. And that was one where the council wanted me to give the developer the county land, and I wouldn't do it. And so I negotiated how they would get the county land. And they were actually pretty decent. They gave us more affordable units, but the most important thing they gave us was the right to return as long as the tenants were in good standing with the landlord. So the council had gotten the right to apply. And anybody in the affordable housing game will tell you, so this is the way this goes. You get to apply, and then your income is too low, or you've got bad credit and you don't get the apartment. We got the agreement that as long as you're in good standing with the landlord, then they let you come back. So we were able to get some additional protections. The other thing is that when they said they're going to do the development, it's a stick of low-rise garden apartments. When they replace the stick, they'll move the people into empty units. They'll rebuild the stick, add additional units, move people then back into the newer units, and then do the other stick. So to your point, there is a way to do this, but you have to be thoughtful and you have to be a developer who actually wants to do it. And I agree, that's something we could do. And I talked to HOC about this because I know they would do this the right way. If somebody gets a hold of a piece of land, we can get the additional development value out of the land. And if we control the process instead of somebody who's looking for luxury housing, we can probably make it work. Who's next? Byron?
Okay, Byron Black, next.
Mark, thank you, first of all, for being here and for your very forthright presentation and answering of our questions. I have a quick two-parter question. The first part is basically what's the status of the scheme, I call it, to widen the I-270 and add those multiple high-price toll lanes? That's part one of a two-parter. What's the status with regard to that project?
So I'm on the group that's or put together that's supposed to look at that project and alternatives. And, the governor has been quoted as talking about looking at reversibles. I absolutely believe that, frankly, on the northern part of 270, you could do reversibles, you could get the lanes in without doing any widening and coming anywhere near the walls. So you could keep a lot of it contained. The hardest piece is going to be along the spur between 495 on the western side. And I think the bridge is something that can be handled. But we're going to try to bring this down as much as we can. I'm a big believer that we need to put that second track on the Mark line, so you can run all day trains that would be like subways during rush hour to help empty out, Frederick County, Hagerstown, and points north of where the metro goes today. That could be really, really helpful. And I think that's something we should push on. And I'm hopeful that he looks at this project and realizes he's buying an incredibly expensive project, but it's going to have uncontrolled prices that his residents are going to have to bear. And he could solve his traffic problem for a lot less. I mean, the easiest thing they could do right now on 270 from where 70 runs into it in Frederick, all the way down to the ICC, there's a lane you could paint in. It's just sitting there by the Jersey barriers. And you could add a lane and see what that does to traffic pretty quickly. And I suspect you would see a serious decline in congestion, which would probably undercut the argument for the fancy thing he wanted to do. I'm going to be pushing in that direction.
Okay, Mark, as I hear what you just said, and I greatly appreciate it, are you suggesting that it's still on the table for Governor Moore to proceed with the P3 proposal and the widening and the toll lanes?
I mean, nothing's off the table. He said he wants to look at it differently and he thinks we can do it better.
Oh, okay. I have my second part, but I do want to interject that I am volunteering as a professional for over 40 years in vehicle and traffic safety matters, coast to coast, and, you know, court qualified as an authority and an expert in these fields to help you and Governor Moore. So I'm reaching out to say, I'd like to assist because I do have some innovations that I think would be much more beneficial to our county for what to happen with the I-270. So that
You and I can talk offline about it.
Byron,
Yeah.
Byron, let's come back to your second question.
And yeah,
later.
Mark, I'll contact your office tomorrow.
Okay,
And the other one.
Byron, we'll come back to
All
your
right.
second question later, Byron. Peggy Dennis?
Yes, thank you, Mark. I'll frame this as a question. Can you help us out with a nudge to Chris Conklin, head of DOT, and his tree man, Brett Linkletter? I brought up about 9 or 10 months ago and had a 2-hour discussion with Brett about the need to set up a Weed Warrior stroke Adopt a Road program using volunteers to go out and eliminate or at least cut, so the tops will be killed, the vines that are growing up all through our tree canopies along the public roads all over the county and the region. We can't take on the region, but we can get a lot of volunteers to go out and do that. And
I will ask about that. That's an easy one. We should be able to create a volunteer corps to do this. It's no skin off our teeth.
With Brett and Chris on that.
Okay, send me a follow-up note or send it to Dale.
Okay, will do.
Okay. Jameson.
Hey, Mark, thanks for coming this evening and speaking with us. As the county rapidly urbanizes, I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions about environmental impacts, flooding, so on. I'd like to ask about something that I think goes under the radar, or perhaps over the radar as the case may be, and that is light pollution. As an avid astrophotographer, I find it annoying. However, it is actually a form of light. It is a form of pollution that has serious environmental impacts, both on, as you may know, there's like a collapse in the population of insects. It has adverse effects on human physiology, psychology. It has serious impacts that I think are either unknown or downplayed. And I'd like to ask what you as county executive might be able to do to address that, and what we can do to maybe get the council to do something to rein this in. Because right now I read an article that says on average urban areas are increasing light pollution by about 8% per year. So it doesn't take very long to double the amount of light pollution in the skies and basically everywhere around us. So I would like to ask you to comment on that. Thank you very much for coming.
This is it's a pretty well recognized problem. People talk about this not infrequently, right? And so we do need to figure out how to deal with it. I'm happy to, this is another one of the things I'll ask you to write a note to me through Dale to talk with our people about, what we're doing. Do we have a strategy with the lights on our roads as a starter to make sure that they're down facing? And the other issue to me is getting buildings to turn off their lights. It just irritates me that lights are kept on for no other reason, so somebody can see the glassy building at night. And that's just a waste of energy in a way, and the polluting source of light. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm happy to try to see if there's some things we can do.
Okay. Kim Prasad.
Good evening, Mark. How are you?
I'm okay. Hanging in there. How are you?
Good. Pretty good. I have 2 questions. Thrive was sold to us as is a way to create diversity, both racially and economically. And yet they immediately circled their wagons and took River Road. north of outside the Beltway out immediately. My
So
question,
shocking.
oh yeah, right. Let's protect exclusionary zoning. My question is, doesn't the county own land off of River Road?
Almost nothing.
But you do own land,
I said almost nothing.
but that's still something.
I'm not sure it amounts to anything.
Okay,
I don't know if I own anything, it might be some parkland up there and we're not going to build anything in a park.
okay.
I mean, I frankly, there's a reason why that didn't get developed in the first place, which long before wealthy people moved out there, because there was a time when you see, if you look around, you'll see the signs of small ramblers and things
Right,
originally stuck up there. The thinking was all the development was going to be north along what was going to become 270 Wisconsin Avenue in Georgia. So they excluded 29 from their thinking. They excluded River Road from their thinking. And all this focus was on that access of Georgia and Wisconsin. And I wouldn't put people out there today because there are no services out there. And thinking about it from a government perspective, I do not want to have to run massive sewer lines, watch people tear up the ground or put in, heavied up electricity that would serve the area. Probably another pumping plant, or at least new additions to the water lines that would have to go out there and serve the community. And there are no jobs out there. So I would turn everybody up there into a commuter, which is what they are today.
right.
So there's no, if you think of the nets on this, there's no net plus to doing that. And so I don't like doing things just because somebody lives there. It's just like, that's not a good enough reason to make a bad decision. It's like,
Well-
I never thought it was like a good reason for doing it.
Well, the reality
agree.
is, the reality is that District 1 has the least density, the least, economic and racial diversity, and this is what Thrive was sold on. So,
Yep.
there's a problem there. And the next
Okay.
question is,
Can I just say something about that? Because I
Yes.
mean, this is a really interesting topic. People have been very careful not to talk about county history,
yeah, let's talk about it.
but it was after the Civil War, the communities remained here, or some of the old slave communities. But Montgomery County was not a mecca for any other attraction of Black or any other working class populations because we had no factories. This county was very rural for a very long time. There used to be an airport off of Dennis Avenue in Silver Spring. That's how rural we were. And when I moved here in 1960, Wheaton Plaza was a field and the Beltway was a forest. So there was not a lot of anything here. So we didn't attract a lot of migration. And migration came, with the Great White Flight out of the District of Columbia. And then, even then, it wasn't a business migration. It was more than anything, people moving out here to live. The housing was initially segregated. There were a few developments that were integrated. Rosemary Hills is one of the first in around 1949 that was built as an integrated community. My neighborhood didn't have covenants on it. It was built around 1960, but all the older neighborhoods had covenants, no Blacks, no Jews, sometimes no Catholics also. And that was what we were supposed to be. But once the open housing laws came into effect, the county integrated, and it integrated pretty widely, and except for where people couldn't afford to live. And when I moved to Silver Spring, right by the Beltway and Forest Glen, my father's house cost about $20,000. I remember them going out and looking at houses in Bethesda, and they couldn't afford them because they cost $45,000. So this was not the high end of the universe, but it was more than working class families. And so segregation, once the racial bars went down, leaving aside steering, leaving aside redlining, but formal segregation was mostly accomplished by price and expensive neighborhoods. But the county didn't build expensive neighborhoods everywhere. And the thing I laugh about when somebody says that you all are trying to keep people out of the county and this is what these housing policies do. And I'm like, you do realize the county was 95% white in 1970. and it's like 55% not white 50 years later. This was not a terribly effective policy. If this is what the policy was, didn't do anything. This county is pretty heavily integrated, and you've got pockets where price is the dictator, but that happens everywhere. And I can't think of a city that doesn't have neighborhoods.
Well, it's not you, but then they sold a fallacy because you cannot, it's a lie. So my second question is, I went to this road diet talk, and of course we know this, but Wheaton is a sweet spot. University Boulevard corridor is a sweet spot. And so they're talking about building, co-locating the whole 9 yards. So if we're going to, I mean, it's just talk, I don't know, but it makes sense because we are affordable. Our land is most affordable compared to a Bethesda. So if you're going to create all these deeply affordable housing, when will the amenities come? When will the equity come in our schools, we got pretty good parks, but our schools suffer, and safety on the roads. I mean, we just last week, a car went from Georgia Avenue straight into a house. So it's just, all these things need to be in development before the people come and all this housing is built. Because as you know, Black communities, low-income communities are an afterthought. Just like, pedestrian safety. In Bethesda, you get pretty streetscapes to keep people from running across the street to go to Starbucks. But in Wheaton, we have fences to stop because we're told immigrants don't know how to cross the street and Blacks don't know how to cross the street.
Thanks, Kim.
You're welcome.
I have heard all this before, Kim, and you're right. I mean, it's I know some of the proponents of this want us to forget about schools, and they say, well, this is an excuse not to allow more housing. It's like, since when is, it's two things. First, since when is saying that schools need to be decent and have enough teachers? Why is that an anti-housing strategy? And then it also tells you that the people don't understand why we had what was called the Adequate Public Facility Act. Because the adequate public facilities didn't mean you were supposed to stop things. It meant you were supposed to build the things you're talking about.
Right.
If you're going to put more people in, you were supposed to put in the schools, the libraries, the rec centers, the police and fire stations. Those are all supposed to come along with population. And what we did, since we weren't going to make the developers pay for any of that stuff, you got the housing. And God help you for when you're going to get the school money that you need or the library that you need. Like we did to Clarksburg, they still don't have a library up there, and they've been there quite a while now. It's a real problem. And, the people that you disagree with try to weaponize this idea of, oh my God, they're asking for, roads and schools or transportation in schools. You must want to keep people out of here. It's like, no. But if you're going to bring them here, bring the things that you're supposed to bring
Exactly
with them. And, I would say you all got to learn to push back. And whether it's talking about the fact that this place integrated, stop pretending that it didn't, and talk about that you're not asking to stop doing things, but it's reminding us we have a responsibility to do the other pieces of this story if you want this county to grow right. I completely agree with you on this stuff.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Liz Joyce.
Yes, first of all, Mark, I want to thank you for this wonderful reality-based presentation that you've given. And I just keep looking in all the media for a reflection of these facts that you're giving us constantly. I don't know how we can get it out there, but I encourage you to keep putting the facts out there. Related to that, I saw the Washington Post article this morning about the Kramer bills and the compromise that the
Right.
state delegation has come up with, which I appreciate because I know the whole proposal could have been for naught. But I'm wondering if there is any way under this compromise, to ultimately hold the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission and our own planning board accountable for the kind of extraordinary ethical failures that took place over the last couple of years. The alcohol issue was simply one of about 10 different violations that took place. And it worries me that the public might never get an accounting of what happened because this investigation is taking place under MNCCP, which polices itself. How do we get to the point that they are accountable to anyone but themselves? And how can we get them to be more transparent and accountable to the public as a whole?
You said it right. I mean, so the bill that we're working on an agreement on just deals with the processes of what we do to approve things. And so that is not on the table. That's not on the table for just this casual discussion between me and planning and trying to solve the problem. The daylight bill, that thing has legs. And I hope this thing passes. And then it is really, one thing you got to figure out is how do you reactivate the civic infrastructure that doesn't just meet, but that also engages either with more people in your neighborhood so people understand what's going on, or with the council in a more collective way. Because the drinking thing, I thought it was just childish. Okay, this is not a big deal. What was a big deal was violating the Open Meetings Act, putting things on consent calendars that weren't legally supposed to be on consent calendars. And there's more stuff that they did, which is highly questionable. And so you have no idea who they talked to. You don't know, there's no log or record of phone calls, conversations, or any of that kind of fun stuff. So it's been a problem. I'm hoping that, residents have to hold people accountable. And, you could have held, in this case, you could have held, the county council accountable. When, one of my employees did something that crossed an ethical line, I was held accountable. And, we took action. They had an employee who violated the ethics multiple times, and the council didn't even bring him in front of them and scold him, let alone require that he leave or anything. So, people have got to start demanding a little higher standard out of, the people who are doing this work. And you ought to look at who the appointments are going to be. You should not just shrug your shoulders and say, oh, well, this is the new planning board. You've got an opportunity. If you see people or you listen to interviews and you don't get a sense that this is, these are going to be good people, you can invite them in front of this group and ask the council's nominees to come in front of the Civic Fed and talk to you about their plans or their ideas about growth. What do they think about how you plan for additional housing? What do they think about the Adequate Public Facilities Act? But I encourage you to be more aggressive and present.
Yes, it's not a matter, the alcohol thing, that was just like the tip of the iceberg. To me, the question is, who was at those happy hours? What kinds of ex parte communications did people with business before the planning board present and get resolved to some extent at those events? That is just like a symptom of an underlying, to me, pattern of corruption that needs to be rooted out and addressed. And it seems to me that the council is attempting to suggest to us that the system worked because they fired the entire planning board. They didn't do their job for many years. They let this go on. And then when it blew up in their faces, they fired the whole planning board. And along with the firing, probably some members of that board who had nothing to do with this mess.
Two of their members had nothing to do with this mess.
Right. And this is despicable because a person loses her job, her health insurance, and her reputation. and we're going to say the system worked. No, it didn't. And I know that it seems to me, I just feel so powerless from having watched this stuff go on for years and all of the problems that it's created and all of the messaging that completely masks all of this. And you know, all of us have to keep speaking up about this because this is a very serious matter. This is not a small bump in the road. This is a symptom of a huge volcano under the road that we all need to talk about and keep talking about.
Thank you, Liz.
I thought, you know, the firing of everybody made it possible to avoid actually assigning responsibility to anybody for anything.
Yep.
Let's take a question from Sue. Sue, you're next.
Hi, Mark.
Hello.
So I know that you've got a lot of plates spinning in the air, but I'd like to talk to you about the Tower Committee. I'd like to know when the reform of the Tower Committee fees are going to take place so that taxpayers are no longer going to be so subsidizing the industry's application fees as they have been for decades. When you're going to replace the sham Tower Committee members who have been locking out public participation and rubber stamping the industry applications. And in the interim of making the changes and reforming the Tower Committee, what you can do to require the TEBS employees and contractors to follow your executive regulations and do their jobs.
Thank you,
Interesting
Sue.
question. That area is the bane of my existence. And we are talking about it again today. We've been tangled up with the companies over the responsibility of getting this legal agreement out. And that's what we're trying to finish up now is the MLA and the rest of the legislation that puts all the stuff that's the relationship of us to the companies in a different framework somewhat. And then after that, we've talked about getting rid of the commission, because I agree we need different people, but we also need different processes. You got to be able to call witnesses. People have to be able to testify. We just got a hold of censor. And so we've been playing with the censor in a couple of locations to see what it does. And we're going to get a meeting with somebody who's got knowledge of how to use these things. So I know whether this is a good enough censor that we can use it and deploy it as opposed to being faced with, well, if you're going to do this, it's going to cost $10,000 for every study. Because the county's not going to pay $10,000 every time somebody wants to put up a tower. So we're actually looking at that. I had the censor in my hands today. We're supposed to be meeting with somebody to figure out, can we use it? And hopefully between that and some other changes we've asked for with our legal department, we will make changes over there. And the council has to pass it because this is not something I can alter all by myself. So we're going to need citizens coming out. I totally agree that they approve things that they shouldn't approve. My staff agrees they approve things they shouldn't approve. I have a structure that I have very little control over right now.
Thank you, Sue, for that question. Mark, I've got a question and a comment. One of our mutual friends contacted me earlier today, knowing that you're going to be on our program. She said that you had interacted with the East County community earlier this week. And she came away from the meeting feeling disappointed when it came to the conversation about economic development in East County. And I wonder if you can comment on that. We have a lot of housing in East County.
Yeah.
We've got a plan for Montgomery College to have an East County campus. But what is the major impediment to, more economic development and more jobs creation up 29 going to Burtonsville?
I mean, there are a number of impediments. I've removed a couple of them over the past couple of years. We got the project at the Gateway. It was New Hampshire Avenue Gateway at the Beltway. We got that unstuck and it's moving forward. We got the town center development along Colesville Road 29, unstuck, under development, construction. You can see the buildings going up. That's happening now. We have a major new housing development of 400 and some units that is going to be going up soon. And you can now finally go up to Burtonsville and see actual construction occurring at the Burtonsville Shopping Center as they're ready to transform that empty shopping center that was down to 1 or 2 open stores to a new shopping center that Edens is going to open up, and it should be done in, I guess, a year to 16 months, something like that. So those things we moved along on. We pushed ahead on getting Montgomery College over there because they thought it was important to put a college on that side. And we're continuing to improve bus rapid transit. So finally we'll get rid of that part of the BRT from New Hampshire Avenue into Silver Spring. That was basically mixed traffic and as slow as a regular road. So we're doing a whole lot of stuff. The one thing I do not control is Jonathan Jen. He has owned that property for over a decade. And he has not done a single thing. And any of you remember, anybody who had the pleasure of going to those meetings when I was on the council, and Jonathan would come in and he had this brown envelope and he'd wave the envelope in the air and he'd say, I have deals in here. I say, I have companies in here who want to come here. I've got international universities. We're going to open up an international university center here. And you have to pass this master plan right away. You don't have time for traffic studies of doing this right. This is urgent to get this done now. Well, the council did it. And the council got nothing for it. He hasn't moved a shovel on anything over there. That is not the government's fault. He is still tying up. I've left $40 million in the capital budget to build the infrastructure over there because I don't dare move it out of there because people will say, oh, you're trying to kill the project. So my money's sitting there. We're working with every developer over there. I don't know if you know, but he was approached by a guy who bought a cricket team, wanted to build a stadium with structured parking and build a shopping center or shopping area to go along with it. He was interested in 40 acres of land to do this development. That got turned down. And I know other people who've brought projects over there and they've also been turned down. So I don't know what the game is. He has never come to the Economic Development Corporation and said, I've got a potential client. Can you help me here? Because he would have helped him. So I don't have a good answer to that. I do not control it. I cannot make him build anything. I can't make him sign deals. And I can't make him, I really can't make him do anything.
Well,
So
thank
we're going
you.
to build, we're going to support everything we can around it. And maybe eventually he'll do something.
Thanks for that candid response. Next question from Sheldon Fishman.
Thank you for your presentation. It's my head is spinning from all you said this earlier this evening. I'd like to follow up a question about approving things that shouldn't be approved and allocating funds to buy things that result in unfunded mandates and environmentally unjust. You know where I'm going, right?
I'm never sure.
Synthetic turf fields.
Yep.
Instead of buying a synthetic turf field, every new synthetic turf field that we buy costs 4 times as much as a state-of-the-art grass field. And I know you've always been supportive of it. So I guess my question is how do we get there so we stop continuing to waste money and all the other reasons? And I want to also bring to your attention one small bill at the state level, which is the chain of custody bill, Delegate Lehman's bill, to at least track where this stuff winds up.
Right.
Anyway,
so we're supporting the bill, and I'm optimistic, I hope, that we'll see something that'll get out of Annapolis this time. They didn't get out of it before, but I think it's the right thing for us to do. And I'm not a fan of synthetic turf. If I can find the votes on the council, if anybody thinks they can help find the votes on the council, I would be more than happy to put in legislation banning the use of any county money by either the school system or by park and planning to put any money into artificial turf, period. That's what I would like to do.
Thanks, Sheldon. Thanks, Mark. Lloyd, you've got a question.
In terms of the ongoing discussions regarding the reform of the planning board, is anything being discussed or likely to be done that would in effect make the planning board listen to the citizens? For the last 7.5 years, the general view of the citizenry was when you appeared before the planning board, they were pretending to listen. It wasn't sinking in. They weren't going to do it. And largely you were wasting your time. We even had one matter where we had objective numbers in terms of the setback between Wisconsin Avenue and an amended site plan, that it didn't meet it. And they still approved it with standard blah, blah boilerplate, how it was significantly conformed to the zoning ordinance and the master plan or sector plan. There's a huge problem for the last 7.5 years that needs to be corrected in this regard.
So I agree with you. One of the reasons I got into this side of politics was I got tired of sitting where you normally would sit and know that people weren't listening to anything I said and that they didn't care. And so I think it's important. I mean, you have to persist, I'll tell you that. Because nothing's going to change, unless people do persist, unless you bring more people along to have these discussions louder and in more places. I mean, the council is going to appoint, this new board. You ought to have a chance to figure out whether you think these people are actually going to pay any attention to anything. And I was worried because when I was on the council, our policy was we would not appoint any civic activists. And then on the other hand, we put Norm Dreyfus on the board.
Right.
Well, he didn't qualify as a civic activist, but sense of equality in this equation. And, it's really a problem when you want to avoid putting people in who are advocates for the community in the way that you want to be advocates for the community. And you put people on who don't even know what the powers of the planning board are, what they should be doing, don't understand the adequate public facilities ordinance. I doubt if any of them were ever told that they had a responsibility to produce adequate public facilities. You don't see discussions anymore where they're weighing what they do in terms of adequate public facilities. They have made the history and the practices of better boards disappear. So I'll do what I can on my side to put light on things, and you guys are going to have to do a lot on your side. But you got lots of neighborhoods who are going to be concerned about some of the things that are coming down the pike. It is a great time to organize.
We're trying. Karen Cordry?
Yeah, hi, Mark. I was just at a meeting this morning with our new Attorney General down in Silver Spring. And one of the things that came up was part of what you talked about with respect to the police and the lack of hiring and the pay and so forth. But I'm also reading next door there's just a real sense, I think, that things are getting out of hand, carjackings, people getting killed in front of the planning board building and things like that, or not killed, but at least shot there and so forth. What else is on the plate in terms of policing? What's going on? What else can you tell us to tell people to say, I'm not going into Silver Spring or Wheaton anymore?
Let me follow up on that, Mark. I know you had a press conference at 2
Right.
o'clock today at the Civic Building. Maybe you can weave
Yeah.
what that was about into your response to Karen's question.
So, we're all too aware of this. And
I know, for sure.
as I said this morning, reality matters less than perceptions. And so somebody was, giving off numbers or, where we sit. And the truth is we are far from the worst place in the universe. It doesn't matter. All it takes is one person getting shot in their garage for no reason at all. And have their life destroyed and their family's life destroyed for people to believe that this is a widespread, horror show. And there are things that happen down there that should not happen down there. But as Kate Stewart was there, the council member who represents that area and former mayor at Tacoma Park, and she talked about she's on the COG board. She's the chair of COG board. That this is happening all over the region. The carjackings, the murders, the anti-Semitic crap, all this stuff is region-wide, and it's probably society-wide, because a whole lot of people have come unglued. I don't know how to glue them back together again. I'm reminded, I was a fan of punk music, I confess, and there was a song where the chant in the song was "No future, no future," and the video for it showed a bunch of kind of skinhead English youth pumping the air with their fists and singing "No future, no future." And I think about kids sometime today, and I think, well, you got a lot of people there don't believe they have a future. And and this is a true story, you can see an article I wrote for the Post probably 22 years ago, where if you've got elementary school kids telling you they don't think they're going to live to be 25, then there are really no bad decisions you can make if that's your worldview. And you got to wonder how kids get into a state where this is their worldview, that it doesn't matter what they do, or that, they put on themselves this image that I'm a bad person and that's a bad person. And I know what a bad person will do. The bad person will shoot me. So I better shoot the bad person before the bad person shoots me. There's a whole lot of messed up thinking
I mean,
that is, kind of come to fruition. And it's not going to be easy to put that genie back in the bottle.
is a lot of this COVID, do you think, that people just have
I-
lost connections for the last couple of years?
I think some of it's COVID, but I got to believe that some of it gets to kind of like more fundamental issues. I mean, it's hard for me not to think of this from the perspective of a teacher, but you could see in kids, if they didn't think they could do well, then they would stop trying. Because the only thing worse than not doing well was appearing to fail. And as any of us know, if you don't try something, you can't fail at it. And so if kids don't believe that they can be successful, then they don't try to be successful, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think we've got to do a lot more work in our schools. We've got to do a lot more work around social emotional stuff, not just the topics of discussion in the curriculum. I think also that, we need to put mental health clinics back in the community. That's something I'm looking to do. When I was growing up, they had mental health clinics in Montgomery County you go to as a community member, and they're not here now. And I think we need to provide more resources for kids in that sphere. We need more activities. I like Governor Hogan's proposal to do this year after high school graduation. And I just want them to be aggressive, and I want them to capture more kids than what they're thinking they might capture, because there are a lot of kids who have no idea what they're going to do when they leave high school. I was like the last generation or the first generation where almost all of us went to college. But the kids in my school didn't go to college. Their parents were tradespeople, largely. And so they would go into the trade, be a carpenter, they'd be an air conditioning mechanic, but they'd be somebody that they knew could put a roof over their head, buy a new fast car, have an air conditioned house, and basically have the same things everybody else had. but they had people they could look at to do that. And I don't think everybody has that now. And I think it leads to a deepening sense of despair and disconnection. And the behaviors are horrible. I don't condone them at all. And we're going to do everything we can do to protect people from them. But if we're going to settle for strategies of triaging the problem, then we're just going to be dealing with this problem endlessly until we start figuring out how and when we intervene. This is why things like minimum wage mean something to me, or affordable housing and rent control, so people have security in their housing and families aren't worrying where they're going to live next month. That's why those things matter to me. And because I know they matter to the people who are most affected by it. I'm not affected by rent control. I'm not affected by affordable housing. My life will be perfectly fine. But for a whole lot of other people, their lives are not going to be fine if you can't figure out how to deal with that problem.
Thanks,
The
Mark.
complex answer to a really painful question.
So we're going to take one question after I do my follow-up, which is what did you decide on for downtown Silver Spring and the particular situation we have down here? And after that question, Eric Cathcart, you'll be the last question.
So what did we decide on? We're sending to the council legislation. If they pass it, we'll write the regulations for it. And it's aimed at businesses that are open between 12 and 6 and that are in an area that is designated as having a crime problem compared to other areas around it. And so we're able to divide Silver Spring into different pieces of Silver Spring because not all of Silver Spring is the same. And there are going to be requirements for all the businesses that are open after 12 as late as 6 in the morning, that they're going to have to abide by requirements in terms of cameras, lighting. We're talking about requiring that the windows cannot be darkened, can't be tinted, they can't be covered with paper and advertisements. You've got to be able to see into the inside of an establishment from a window. We're talking about metal detectors. Some people are using wands. They're hiring, security, often off-duty police officers. So we're going to have a set of requirements. So when it goes into effect, if someone's not doing what they're supposed to do, they're going to be hit with a fine. There will be repeat fines. They can be given every day. You don't have to wait to go to court and get the case disposed before you fine them again. And ultimately, if we find people who just simply aren't going to conform, we will have the authority to shut them down.
So was there any discussion about limiting the hours of operation so they can't stay open to 6 a.m. in the morning?
So we had discussions with council members and there was no consensus on doing that. So this bill reflects what we have a consensus on today, which is putting these restrictions in place. And there has been a decline in incidents from them since we began doing we brought in people from the state and the health department and every department we can imagine to inspect. And when we started doing that and finding people, we got better compliance, and we'll see how much compliance we get out of an even stricter set of regulations. And if that doesn't work, I'll be the first person to say, just shut everything at 12, or not 12, too early, 2.
Thank you very much. Eric Cathcart.
Hey, Mark, how you doing? Good to see you. Hey, I'm the high school kid that ended up in a punk band and had a career playing in music, and here I am, a civic president going into my 3rd year, and we're right on the edge, and we got to get you over here, Mark, to North Hills of Sligo Creek and see all of the good things that we're doing over here. It'd blow your mind what we're doing. And one of the things that we're doing is we're working with Commander McBain, who's adopted us as a Adopt a Community program in an effort to take down crime. We're right on the bubble. We're right on the edge of downtown Silver Spring. So I just want to give a shout out to the commander that we're working the problem. and it seems like we've got a good program, and it's something I would encourage you to kind of poke around and see what we're doing with him. It's working out. But here I am as a civic president, and reflecting over the last 3 years and thinking about, what's the hardest thing that I'm dealing with daily, leading my community. And that really the hardest thing is communicating with the county, especially DOT. And that just, I keep circling back to every single problem I have seems to come back to the county. And how can I fast track my problems, and how can I be heard, and how can I advocate for my community, and how can I get my county agencies to really help me out. I'm doing the best I can. As a volunteer, I'm doing everything I can on this end, but I'm just feeling like there's a little pushback on the county end, and I really don't think it's necessary. I hope I can find a way to streamline some of our problems, and so I'm just reaching out to you and saying I need some help with this.
Look, you and I talk, so you should get together and give me a sense of what it is that you're not able to get done. I mean, some stuff they can't do. I mean, it's not a legislative.
Yeah, and I'm figuring that out. It's either SHA or it's Montgomery County. I'm figuring that out. But there's a lot of time for those of us who are leaders of our communities. There's too much time being spent in back and forth emails. If we could just get a face-to-face with some managers and just, it's frustrating on this end.
Okay, well, give me a list of what you need to talk about. And again, Dale's been probably have his email more than mine.
Well, yeah, I'm filling big shoes. Dale used to be president here. So, but thank you so much for sharing your time. I just wanted, on behalf of the whole group here, we've taken up a lot of your time. Thank you so much for your investment into us. So I'll leave it at that.
I like you guys. I'm like a lot of other political people. I actually like what you do. And I think, you're misunderstood. And I think people need to be really clear about what messages you put out there, so that, clever tweeters can't, distort every word you say, which we all know is, probably a labor of love for some of these people. But the fact is that, the facts are on your side. Thrive was a sham. It's not going to produce affordable housing. We have successfully integrated the community. So when people talk about keeping people out, they obviously don't know what they're talking about. Either that, or they live in some secluded neighborhood, but they actually don't see what's happening in Montgomery County. I suppose that's possible. But, you do good work and you raise good issues, and you have every right to assert that there's a responsibility of government to provide adequate public facilities. You ought to read that definition. You ought to share that definition with your neighbors and say, this is what we're entitled to. This is what we want.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive, for all of your time and for your words this evening. We look forward to continue working with you and members of your cabinet. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you soon.
I'll come back. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.